ask yourselves, what are you doing in this time of great challenge? What are you doing to unlock minds?
I had to ask myself those questions. And this is my response to you.
Those who criticize our generation forget who raised it, and also forget, or just don't have a clue, what position they have left us in. So it is our turn now to fix what has been done, and we must stand up, and we must stand up quickly for our next generation, for our grandchildren, before it's too late. So I just want to ask you one question, and that question is, what does freedom mean to you?
Ron Paul now, Republican congressman from Texas, and of course a former presidential candidate himself. He's calling in today on the telephone from Texas. Congressman Paul, always good to talk to you. If a Paul supporter is watching the debate tonight and needs to be convinced by Mitt Romney, what does Romney have to do you think?
Make sure he sounds a little bit different than the other and be convincing that his policies are a lot different. Many people that have joined the freedom movement were frustrated, with the whole process because they can't see enough difference. So he has to be different. But unfortunately, when it comes to, whether it's the foreign policy, they're very similar, or whether it has to do with the Federal Reserve, it's similar. So I think our supporters see too much similarity. And I think he has to show that he is quite different, just not on management style, but really philosophically. That's what so many people are looking for.
First of all, I don't have a $5 trillion tax cut. I don't have a tax cut of the scale that you're talking about. My view is that we ought to provide tax relief to people in the middle class. But I'm not going to reduce the share of taxes paid by high-income people. High-income people are doing just fine in this economy. They'll do fine whether you're president or I am. The people who are having the hard time right now are middle-income Americans. Under the president's policies, middle-income Americans have been buried. They're just being crushed. Middle-income Americans have seen their income come down by $4,300. This is a tax in and of itself. I'll call it the economy tax. It's been crushing. At the same time, gasoline prices have doubled under the president. Electric rates are up. Food prices are up. Health care costs have gone up by $2,500 a family. Middle-income families are being crushed. And so the question is how to get them going again.
The email I received was from Karen, a computer teacher at Queen of Peace Elementary School. Karen's working with 6th graders on a poster project about the campaign. Quote, I'm having the students research the candidates, finding facts, developing a campaign poster, and then voting on Election Day. We did an early voting experience yesterday before they did any research. I then found a website that listed all of the candidates that were running. And surprise to everyone, there is more than Romney and Obama running.
Allgov pointed out, though, why are there only 2 candidates in the presidential debates? And Gary Johnson of the Libertarian Party is on the ballot in 48 of the 50 states, and Dr. Jill Stein of the Green Party is on 39 state ballots. And a pure democracy, it would be considered a given that Johnson and Stein would join Obama and Romney on the stage. But in the United States, elections don't work that way.
Well, Karen's right on. There are more candidates running. In fact, here in Ohio, there are at least 9 candidates on the ballot. Aside from the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, the Libertarian Party, the Constitution Party, the Green Party, even the modern-day Whig Party. So the question, why, if we're not a 2-party country, do we have debates that include candidates from only major parties?
That's because 3 presidential debates are not run by the government, but a non-profit organization, the Commission of Presidential Debates, the CPD, created in 1987 by the Democrat and Republicans, or by the same party, the Democrat and Republican Party, as bipartisan rather than nonpartisan effort. So what does that mean?
Well, the answer is actually pretty simple. It's something called the Commission on Presidential Debates. The CPD was established in 1987. According to its website, its mission is to ensure that debates, as a permanent part of every general election, provide the best possible information to viewers and listeners. Well, what a noble mission. But it begs the question, if the goal is to provide the best possible information to viewers and listeners, how can you do that with only 2 candidates being given time to speak?
Well, that means that it doesn't matter that you want a 3rd or maybe even 4th choice, or that there are other ideas besides bombing Iran or bombing Iran. Okay, there are other choices to bombing Iran over fake cries of nuclear weapons.
You do have to have some criteria, though, don't you? Well, of course. And the CPD has 3 criteria. In order to be included, a candidate, number 1, must meet the constitutional requirements to be elected president. Understandable. Why allow someone to debate if they can't legally become president? Number 2, they must be on the ballot in enough states to win the Electoral College. Again, understandable. If a candidate cannot mathematically win, there's no reason to put them in a national debate. But then there's number 3. They must have received at least 15% support in 5 national polls. Well, that one is much less reasonable.
But what's interesting at the bottom of this article, it says, for the record, the debates have 7 national sponsors. Anheuser-Busch, the Howard G. Buffett Foundation, Sheldon S. Cohen, Crowell Moring, the International Bottled Water Association, and the Kovler Fund and Southwest Airlines. There used to be more, but the YWCA and Philips Electronics have withdrawn their support over the issue of third-party access, as has British advertising firm BBH New York.
This year's debates, which are funded by sponsors, just lost 3 of their 10 sponsors: Philips Electronics, BBH New York, and the YWCA. They have all pulled their sponsor money because of the lack of inclusion of one particular candidate, Libertarian candidate and former New Mexico Governor Gary Johnson. But that 15% support rule is fairly new. In fact, how the CPD came into existence is pretty interesting. In 1976, 1980, and 1984, the League of Women Voters moderated presidential debates. They then walked away from it, saying that the demands of the 2 parties, Republican and Democrat, would perpetuate a fraud on the American people. The CPD, the Commission on Presidential Debates, as we know it today, was then formed by the Republican and Democrat parties. The commission is headed up by Frank Fahrenkopf, a former head of the Republican National Committee, and former Clinton White House Press Secretary Michael D. McCurry. So let's be clear, a debate commission that's run by former bigwigs from the Republican and Democrat parties and creates a 15% polling rule in 5 national polls isn't trying to create inclusion, they're trying to prevent it. If you don't have the money of the 2 big parties, getting your name out nationally to get into those polls, well, it can only happen if you're a billionaire like Ross Perot. Aside from billionaires, no one else has a chance. This lack of inclusion is finally getting some attention, though.
Who are you going to vote for?
Haven't decided yet. At least I haven't decided. I've decided not to announce it. So no, I'm going to sort of sit tight for a little bit longer.
No, that's fine if you don't want to announce it, obviously. And some people have made a big deal about how the fact, you know, how you haven't endorsed Romney. But have you really not decided, or you're just not going to tell us?
In a way, about voting for somebody, I obviously didn't. You know, I haven't announced in support for Romney, so. Right. That means that's very unlikely, and I don't think anybody thinks I'm going to vote for Obama. So it's back to that frustration level of not seeing a dramatic choice in the way the system works, and you know, the inability.
How do you think those supporters who had a lot of enthusiasm for you in the primaries when you've run for president, how do you think they'll break down in terms of their support in this election? I mean, is it 80-20 Romney? Is it closer to 50-50? I mean, who do you think they'll move towards?
I think the best word is break down. You know, they'll probably go different places. Some will be angry at the Republicans for the way they were treated at the convention, and they might not show up. Some may vote Libertarian. Some, you know, may go with Romney. There's actually some of the young people, because of foreign policy issue, might even go with Obama. So it's hard to say. I know one thing for certain. That they're not all going to the one place, because they're very individualistic and they don't see the consequences exactly the same. So I think it would be very difficult to predict. Could be a big deal, by the way, in especially some of these swing states if they don't show up.
Governor Johnson is the next highest polling candidate after President Obama and Governor Romney. But when he is included in polling, the effect he's having is significant. For instance, on Wednesday, Gravis Marketing and Capital Correspondent released results from Ohio from a poll conducted September 21st through the 22nd. That poll included 594 likely voters, and it covered the presidential race and the Senate elections. Take a look. In that poll, Obama-Biden, 45%. Other or unsure, 10%. Romney-Ryan, 44%. But then, Gary Johnson's name was added, and here's how the numbers shook out then. Johnson, 10%. Obama-Biden, 44%. Other unsure, 7%. Romney-Ryan, 37%. So what you need to know, the fastest growing segment of the American electorate, independent voters. 43% of undecided swing voters are independents, and it's all about trajectory. Independent voters have been on the rise, while the parties have been playing to a shrinking base. There are now 6 states where independents outnumber both Republicans and Democrats. And that growing segment of the population isn't looking for fewer options, they're looking for more. This election could be an historic last for the control of this two-party system.
Like tonight, there's a debate going on, and if you come to this conclusion that the candidates aren't all that different, why do we have to just listen to 2 of them? I mean, there are other people who, you know, technically are capable of winning because they're on a lot of ballots.
Like Gary Johnson you're talking about.
Yeah, and in this country, you have probably less democracy than in even some of these other countries that we're trying to badger into being good, follow good democracy.
So you'll vote for him then, probably.
So, because they felt that there should be third parties included, these people withdrew their support. Now, here's what I'm saying. We're about to put on the screen the list of sponsors with their contact info. Let's roll those graphics right now. And basically, if you want to see other sponsors get in there, let's go hit these people up and let's ask them, say, hey, we're not going to shop at your places. We're not going to we're not going to support you as an organization until you withdraw your support to this international corporation of the CBD, this Commission on Presidential Debates. Withdraw your support there so we can have a debate with all parties who are basically eligible. Everyone here would be eligible to win depending on what states they're in and what electoral votes they could get. All 4 of these candidates. So why not have a debate with all 4? What do they have to hide? I mean, these guys have way more money than Jill Stein and Gary Johnson. You know, Obama and Romney are going to outspend everyone. And so what's the harm in letting other people in and let's having a fair debate?
Pardon me?
You've Gary Johnson. You'd probably support him.
I haven't decided that, no.
It's interesting. Is there anything, but let me ask you one more question before I let you go, because we have all this talk about the undecided voters out there. I think Reuters said it's about 6% of the electorate, and, you know, the different polls say different things. Is there something, as you said, you're not going to vote for the president, is there something that Mitt Romney could still do at this late hour to convince you, Ron Paul, to support him?
Bring the troops home, you know, and quit this preaching of a foreign policy where he wants to expand our presence overseas, and that's a big thing with especially the young people that have been in the freedom movement. So the foreign policy would have to change, and he'd have to give more than token support for a token audit of the Federal Reserve. He'd have to say, well, there's something wrong with central banking and economic planning, because that is the reason we have such difficulty, you know, in the economy because of Federal Reserve policy. So likelihood of hearing